Hello. I have a privilege today to introduce for you Dr. James Adam from Arizona State University. Dr. James Adam is responsible for the autism and Asperger's research program at the university. He's the author of many publications on that topic. He is a person helping many parents of autistic children and autistic patients to have some treatment, some support. And I'm so privileged that you have found the time for us. Maybe before we talk about different questions that are in my mind, and I really believe that it's the first time that we have a conversation, but we could continue in the future. I really would like to start in this personal question because you are university worker, but you are engineer. Nothing common with biological, science or medical. You are not physician. So how it started that now you are involved in research on topic of autism?
Sure. So my background is I am an engineer by training. I was chair of materials engineering. Part of what I do in looking at that is looking at toxic metal exposure, which is an issue in autism. And a lot of my work was basically computational chemistry. So I had a strong chemistry background. When my daughter was diagnosed with autism over 30 years ago, and we were told, don't know how to treat it, we don't know the cause of it, we don't know how to prevent it, I decided research needed to be done. And so since then, I've spent close to 25 years publishing over 60 papers on autism, carrying out many clinical trials, founding our Autism Nutrition Research Center, which is a nonprofit center that distributes the vitamin mineral supplement we've developed. I formed Autism Diagnostics. We're developing a diagnostic test for autism that seems highly accurate. And I founded the Gut-Brain Axis Therapeutics, which is a company which is driving clinical trials on microbiota transplant to treat gut problems in children with autism. So I've come a long ways in the last 25 years and have a lot of research behind what we do.
Okay, thank you. It's a lot. You mentioned fecal microbiota transplant. I think it's a great idea for the future, but I would like to start with this nutritional idea because, autism spectrum disorder is neurodevelopmental condition. So we are talking about something in nervous tissue, something neurological. So I would start with very basic question. How might nutrition or nutritional intervention be helpful for autistic children or autistic patients? Talking about nutrition, I mean, on one side, diet, on the other side or the other wing, nutritional supplements. So how they can help for neurodevelopmental condition?
Yeah. So one of the issues is just that in general, many children in general have poor diets. They're especially not getting enough vegetables or fruit, sometimes not enough protein. Children with autism sometimes have a worse diet. In the US, they often eat just French fries and chicken nuggets. And a big problem is that they often eat a very narrow variety of foods. And if you eat only a small selection of foods, then there's a fair chance that of the many over 30 vitamins and minerals that you might be getting enough of some, but then not enough of others. Any dietitian would say they recommend a rainbow, many different vegetables and fruits and a wide variety of foods. So when children with autism consume only a narrow amount, that's a big problem. But also another issue is that we've discovered children with autism often need higher levels of certain vitamins and minerals to help them. For example, the biggest nutritional deficiency in almost every child with autism is sulfate deficiency. Sulfate is the fourth most common mineral in your body, and it plays a very important role in detoxification. It's a major way to detoxify toxins up until about age 6, and it's still very important afterwards. And we've discovered that children with autism have very low levels of sulfate in their body, probably because their detoxification system is working overtime. There are too many toxins, especially from gut bacteria, that need to be detoxified. So just one example where children with autism need high amounts. Also, it's been discovered they need high amounts of a special type of folate. In the United States, we primarily use folic acid, which is an artificial form of folate, and it works great for mice, but humans are not very good at converting folic acid to the active forms of folate. And so research studies have shown that giving folate to children with autism in the form of methylfolate or folinic acid works much better. There's a huge number of vitamins and minerals. We probably don't have time to cover every one. But the other thing to realize is that even during pregnancy, I've published 2 major articles on determining the optimal levels of vitamins and minerals in prenatal supplements. And there's very good evidence that low amounts of certain nutrients during pregnancy can increase the risk of autism. So too little folic acid or folate, or too much folic acid also is a problem. Too low iron. Most women, about 10% of women start their pregnancy with iron deficiency anemia. Midway into pregnancy, it's 30%. And low iron is needed to transport oxygen, the body and brain. So during pregnancy, many women become physically tired, mentally tired, and their child's brain is not getting enough oxygen. So low iron is also a major risk factor. So good nutrition begins in pregnancy, but again, continues into infancy and childhood and even adulthood. We found that vitamin mineral supplements can be very helpful for adults with autism as well.
Mm-hmm. And when you mention, for example, these molecules, they are needed, do you mean that the source of them is diet or they are nutritional supplementation?
Well, we always recommend a healthy diet first. So ideally, we want to have a healthy diet with a rich variety of vegetables, some fruit, whole fruit, not fruit juice, because that's too much sugar without the fiber. And then also an adequate amount of protein, low amount of carbohydrates, low amount of sugar. Most Americans are awful. They eat far too much sugar, 100 pounds of sugar a year, 50 kilos of sugar. It's ridiculous. Okay, so these are many simple things that can be done. But one of the biggest problems in the Western world is low fiber consumption. That fiber is needed for your gut bacteria to feed them, and fiber is converted into butyrate. That's the main food for the cells that line the gut. And we've discovered, it's well known that women in the US consume only about half the recommended amount of fiber, which you get from your vegetables, from your whole fruit, not fruit juice, from your whole grains, from your beans and legumes. And most women just are not getting enough. Men are even worse in the US. They consume only a third the amount of fiber. And so literally in the US, those people, their guts are starving for butyrate. And that's why gut problems are so common in the US. But also, unfortunately, our studies suggest it may even be worse in mothers of kids with autism. So during their pregnancy, then the butyrate is very important, discovered for treating mitochondrial disorders. One of my colleagues, Richard Fry, is the world's expert on mitochondrial disorders and autism. He's evaluated about 40% of children with autism have major mitochondrial defects. Mitochondria produce the primary energy source for the body and the brain. And he did a study with cell lines showing butyrate treats that. And we've done studies showing that we can, through microbiota transplant, increase butyrate producing bacteria in the gut and thereby improve butyrate and thereby improve mitochondrial function. So sorry to give a long answer, but bottom line is healthy diet is where we really want to start. But for children with autism, it's generally not enough because of various metabolic problems. That's when we need to also supplement.
Okay, I like your answer because, quite often to my patient, I say that the good diet is not only nutrition for your body, but also nutrition for your best friends, for your microbiota. You never, forget about your allies, about your friends, and fibers. They are nutrition for good bacteria. So we really need to take care for them because they will take care for us. Okay, another question is because when we say about autism, now we use this phrase that is autism spectrum, and spectrum means there are many different manifestations, and we describe quite often autism as something complex. It means there are many different reasons, many different roots, mechanisms. So when I'm thinking about variety of problems, then can we really think about some unified, approach for autism, because maybe everybody has different needs, different pathologies. Is there something like the diet which is good for every autistic person, and like standard supplementation plan, which is like a must-have or something important for everybody?
Yeah. So it's a good question. Autism is a spectrum. In general, what we found, we've done a 12-month clinical trial with diets and with supplements. And certainly a healthy diet is important for everyone, with very rare exceptions. Some people need a special type of diet for rare genetic conditions. But in general, healthy diet rich in vegetables, fruit, and protein, and limited amounts of carbohydrates, not excessive, and very limited junk food and sugar. But some people with autism, and many people with autism, have food allergies that are very specific to that person. One of the reasons seems to be due to poor microbiome in the gut, leading to an altered immune system, and also leading to increased intestinal permeability, that we call leaky gut. Mm-hmm. So partly digested food leaks out of the gut into the brain, into the body and the brain. And the immune system says this shouldn't be here, so it launches an immune attack against it. The most common allergens are the ones people consume the most. So if someone's eating a lot of a particular food, they're more likely to become allergic to it. So rotating a diet, not always eating the same thing, can help reduce that. But in general, food allergy testing can help, or just doing an elimination diet, eliminating common allergens. Gluten is a common allergen in autism. Dairy is a common allergen. There are other potential problems with those foods as well. Excess sugar, not an allergen per se, but just not helpful. Eggs, although they're a very good source of protein, many people can't consume them. Chocolate, unfortunately, also is often a common allergen. So those are some of the more, and nuts are also common allergens. Sometimes fish or shellfish are also common allergens. So checking for those can be helpful. So those are, looking at allergen-free diets is a good place to start. So the core diet we generally recommend is a gluten-free, casein-free diet that's healthy. And usually within a week of going dairy-free, people will report the child just seems more with it. They seem to be out of a fog, better able to concentrate and more aware. And the gluten-free diet usually takes about a month or so. For both diets, it's important to be very strict. Doesn't help every child, but it seems to help about half to 2/3. So it's worth trying going gluten-free and casein-free, and then continuing that if it's beneficial, and then checking for other individual food allergies.
Okay, this is diet. And what about supplementation? Is there like a plan that some list of supplements or vitamins, minerals, maybe some lipids, that they are like crucial for everybody? No, I'm not talking about one person with some tests showing that there's need for something, but if I would like to offer a list of the supplementation for every autistic person, is there any particular list that you can recommend?
Yeah, so we did a 12-month study of children and adults with autism, where we treated them with 6 different nutritional supplements and special diet to provide optimal, comprehensive nutritional support. From that, we found that 4 treatments were the most, really 3 treatments were the most important. And those treatments first began with our vitamin mineral supplement that we now distribute through our nonprofit Autism Nutrition Research Center. That vitamin mineral supplement has been studied in several different trials now, and seems to help about 3/4 of children and adults with autism. It contains good amounts of almost all vitamins and minerals, except it doesn't have iron because not everyone needs iron, and doesn't have copper because some kids with autism have excess copper. But in general, that seems very helpful, provide vitamins and minerals and a few other key nutrients. In addition, there are roughly 15 studies now showing that children with autism have unusually low levels of omega-3 fatty acids. In fact, a study just came out showing that women who consume fish less than once a month during their pregnancy have a 20% increased risk of having a child with autism. So we know that omega-3s, especially DHA during pregnancy, are very important, and EPA is needed later. So there are 4 studies showing that giving small amounts of fish oil help a little bit, and our study showed giving a high amount of fish oil helped a lot. So we recommend giving a substantial amount of fish oil, but you have to give it after our vitamin mineral supplement, which has some carnitine in it, because about 3% of kids with autism, their bodies are starved for carnitine. So within a week on fish oil, they'll have a severe behavioral reaction, become very aggressive, very irritable. So we prevent that by making sure they have some carnitine beforehand. So those are the 2 main key supplements that we think virtually every child with autism should have. And then also, as I mentioned, a healthy allergen-free diet. So gluten and casein being 2 of the most common. The third treatment that we think is helpful for a subset of children with autism, we did a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial of carnitine. Carnitine is needed to transport fats into the mitochondria and out of the mitochondria. And we found that a subset of children with autism benefited from it. Another group did a similar study, but with twice the dose and twice the length. They found even more benefit. So we recommend also giving L-carnitine. It's a better absorbed form than acetylcarnitine, and the body converts it to acetylcarnitine. And we find this is helpful for children who have low energy, for children who fatigue very easily, and also who are not eating any beef products or pork products, because those are pretty much the only 2 sources of carnitine in the diet. So for children, for the subset of children who have low energy and aren't consuming beef or pork, this can be a very powerful supplement for that subset, but they need a lot of it. And so we recommend that separately in addition to what's in our vitamin mineral supplement.
Okay, you mentioned as these approaches, which are interventions, they are like safe for everybody. Or maybe that's a good question, because you mentioned that for iron, for copper, okay, it's good to make the test and the doctor can help with the decision. But some other supplementation, they are like for every autistic child. And usually, you know, of course, parents, they have this consideration, is it safe for my child? So can we say that, you know, what you mentioned, the list of this supplementation is something safe for children?
Yeah, so our supplement is very safe. We've had it in one study, we had 141 participants. Another study, we had 50 some. Our latest study had 106 people, 161 people who have been using it for up to 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it's in our study, we measured carefully pre and post levels of safety factors in the blood, metabolic panels, blood counts, and no safety concerns there. But there is a rare subset, maybe 2% of kids with autism, who just cannot tolerate certain B vitamins. It's due to a specific genetic factor. So maybe 2 or 3% of kids can't tolerate any B vitamins. They have an overactive system. But if the supplement doesn't work well for them, then just stop. We always recommend with any supplement, start at a low dose and gradually increase. And so with our vitamin mineral supplement, especially because it's high dose, we increase the dose gradually over 1 month, each week, increasing the dose a bit more. Most people do best at the full dose. Some people do better at half. A few people do better at half to 3/4 of the dose. So you tailor it for the individual. You could spend thousands of dollars on blood tests to try to guess how much you need, but it's much simpler just to take the supplement and see if it helps. And again, it helps roughly 3/4 of children and adults with autism and is very safe. Takes about 3 months to see effect. If you don't see good benefit in 3 months, then we recommend stopping it, moving on to other things.
Mm. So if we start, like, as you mentioned, with the lower dose, increase slowly, we introduce not every supplement the very same day, but let's say step by step, then you can really be on the safe side. In my list of questions, there's a question which is I think it's now quite obvious, because I wanted to ask you about rationale, about is this nutritional approach something like evidence-based, but until now, you mentioned that you have more than 20 years of research on the field, many publications. In front of me, I have summary of dietary, nutritional, and medical treatment for autism by you, and there are 150 references in this, paper. So I guess that we could answer that, it's supported by the research. And usually I'm thinking, if it is supported by the research, why people they really don't know about that? Because it's not something that happened last week. It's many years of publication. Can we really say that this nutritional approach is evidence-based and should be offered to every autistic child in the world?
I think the answer is yes. I think there's good evidence, but you would always like to have more evidence. So the problem is that the pharmaceutical industry, when they do a huge amount of research to get a drug approved by the government, then they might spend on average $1 billion to get a new drug approved, because they're looking at billions of dollars a year in sales. For supplements, we can't patent them. So there's very little money for research, at least in the US. The federal government really does not encourage research on nutritional supplements. But still, I think the evidence is very clear that some nutritional needs are common in the general population. In the United States, 30% of the population has low vitamin D. They just don't get enough exposure to the sun. And so if you're not tan, you're probably low in vitamin D. And so we could go on and on for each vitamin, but for vitamin B6 and magnesium, there are over 18 studies showing high-dose vitamin B6 helps about 1/3 of children and adults with autism. So there are many, many studies. Again, it's a matter of, is it enough to convince the government to approve it as a drug? Well, no one can afford to spend $1 billion to get it approved, because anyone can just produce it. But I think there are many groups out there producing vitamin mineral supplements for autism. We think we have the best because we've done the most research on it, but there are others out there that are similar that people can look at too. But I think there's no doubt our thinking is you want to first start with making sure the child has all of the nutritional support they need. And our research suggests that about 3/4 of kids with autism or more would benefit from healthier diets and nutritional supplementation for certain things.
Mm-hmm. When I'm thinking about, interventions for autism, our approach to autism, in my mind, I have like a 3-floor building. The first floor is behavioral approach, which is kind of standard. Nobody doubts that it's helping to function autistic children. The second floor is nutritional, and now we are talking about this diet plus supplementation. And on top, we have also this medical approach. And here we need psychologists, here we need parents, which are well educated, and maybe sometimes support of the nutritionists, dietitians. And talking about medical, we need medical doctor, physicians who knows more. Do you believe like quite soon, like behavioral approach is standard, and no doubt, quite soon these nutritional interventions, they become standard, and there will be no doubt about these interventions?
I think it will take even more research studies to convince physicians, and I think many physicians prefer to wait for FDA approval, and that's just not going to happen for most nutritional supplements for the reasons I mentioned. It costs $1 billion to get a drug approved. And so I think that we'll continue in the situation where, yes, there's more and more evidence. Our group has published 60 studies. Many other groups have published other studies. I think the evidence is clear if you look at it, that nutritional support is needed for most children and adults with autism. But will everyone prescribe it? Not necessarily. I think it will take even more work to demonstrate that. But that's why we're doing the studies we are, to try to eventually get.
I'm quite optimistic because I believe that, we are not providing so much products. You have good quality supplement, but we are providing the solution, the knowledge. And for example, you could offer some good omega-3 or some good fish oil, but maybe if there are some other producers all over the world with different companies, they can still achieve the same goal, actually. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there are many fish oil products out there. We happen to choose to distribute one from one company, Nordic Naturals, because it's a good company. But there are many other good producers, and there are also some bad producers of fish oil. The best way to know the quality of the fish oil is to smell it. If it smells bad, it is bad. So it's a very simple test of rancidity.
Okay. A few times in our conversation about nutrition, you mentioned gut, because we mentioned this, research, we have mentioned fibers, we have mentioned food intolerances or allergies, we have mentioned butyric acid. So maybe at the end of our today's conversation, I would just ask you a little, tell me more about, this fecal microbiota transfer research, because you have done a few years ago the phase 1, as I understand the phase 2 is now in progress. Like, tell us something more about this, research.
Okay, so briefly, just to give you a little bit of background, what really interested us was there was a study of the use of a special antibiotic called vancomycin for treating children with autism who had gut problems. And in the study, they gave a unusually long course of it, 8 weeks. The standard dose is just 10 days. They saw great improvements in GI symptoms and autism symptoms. But then when they stopped treatment within a few weeks, even though they gave standard probiotics, those benefits were lost. And this special antibiotic is not absorbed into the rest of the body. It remains in the gut, which makes it very safe. So that tells us that there were pathogens in the gut producing harmful chemicals that are affecting the children, but that unfortunately, when you stop the vancomycin, they just grow back. I was involved in a similar study a few years later at the Royal Free Hospital in the UK. It's the top GI hospital in the United Kingdom. And again, children were treated for 3 months with a combination of 2 antibiotics. Great improvements in GI symptoms, great improvements in autism symptoms. And a month later, all the benefits were lost, a month after treatment was stopped. So it told us that we're wiping out the bad gut bacteria, but they're just returning. So I think of it like a garden. You have a garden filled with weeds. You can pluck all the weeds, and if you do nothing else, those weeds just grow right back. So that's where we came up with the idea of microbiota transplant. There had already been a number of studies, and since then there have been even more studies of probiotics for people with autism. There have been now a dozen studies. We just conducted the largest one. But the problem with probiotics, standard probiotics, is they're bacteria that generally grow in milk. They're not bacteria that grow and engraft in the human body. So they can have some limited benefit as if you take them, but they just pass through the body. They don't stay there. So when you stop taking them, they'll disappear from your body in a week or 2. They represent less than 10% of all the bacteria in your gut. So 90%, over 90% of your gut bacteria are anaerobic bacteria. They're killed by oxygen, whereas standard probiotics are aerobic. They grow in milk, in air. So you're just giving the wrong thing. The analogy of a garden is if you want to grow corn and you only have seeds for wheat, you can't grow the corn. It just doesn't work. So microbiota transplant has been used for other GI conditions, especially a condition called a Clostridium difficile infection. And C. diff infections are horrible. They lead to life-threatening diarrhea in the US. 500,000 people a year used to get C. diff infections. 25,000 people died from them. Just life-threatening diarrhea, you just get weaker and weaker until you die. Antibiotics can help temporarily, but it often comes back. It was discovered if you just take raw poop, raw stool from a sick person, put it into, from a healthy person, put it into the sick person, it cures them of C. diff in 2 to 3 days. Just one dose. You go from dying to being cured. And unlike with antibiotics, there's almost zero risk of it ever returning. You're generally cured for life. It's miraculous. And it's since been approved by the FDA for treating C. diff infection. So it's now a purified form that's been approved, but that's work. We realized this early on. We've done other studies 12 years ago showing that there's a very strong correlation of gut problems with autism severity. The higher the gut problems, children with autism who have gut problems have worse autism symptoms across the board, worse speech problems, worse social problems, worse physical and behavioral problems. If you're in pain, you're going to be more irritable. You're going to be more aggressive. You're going to have trouble concentrating, trouble learning. So that led us then, a colleague of ours in Australia treated 7 children with autism who had gut problems, and he treated them. He found they were the hardest patients to treat that he'd ever treated. So instead of treating them once, he treated them every day for 3 months. And slowly, gradually, their GI problems improved. To his surprise, the parents said the children's language and behavior were improving too. So he was very surprised to hear that. Never published it, but he shared the results with me. We shared the results with the FDA, and they allowed us to go ahead and do our first clinical study, which showed great success. And since then, we've conducted 3 other clinical trials, phase 2 clinical trials. One study for children with autism, one study for adults with autism, one for a very rare type of genetic autism called Pitt-Hopkins. All 3 studies show it's very safe, show that it's very helpful in improving GI symptoms and very helpful in improving autism symptoms. What's thrilling to us is it's even helpful in adults who have had these GI and autism symptoms 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and they can still be treated and still benefit. So that's a short answer. Sorry if it's a little long-winded, but I can tell you more if you want. But that's bottom line is it looks very promising. We've started a company now to help fund us to do the final study for autism, which we hope to do in a year and a half from now. And so we formed a company. Over 50 autism families are funding it. So it's a very unusual company. It's funded by autism families, help treat autism families, hopefully become the first FDA-approved treatment for the core symptoms of autism. So we're very hopeful about it. But even though I've emphasized our studies up till now have been for treating kids with autism who have gut problems, we've been doing very extensive measurements of microbial metabolites. And we can now say that roughly 90% of children with autism have extremely high levels of any one of 32 very toxic metabolites. One of them, for example, paracresol, 17 studies of it for autism. Every study shows it's elevated in a subset of kids with autism, in about a quarter to a third. You don't see many studies where all 17 studies agree. So it's pretty amazing. We know that paracresol is a horrible chemical. You put it into mice, it causes autistic symptoms in mice. It changes their behavior, their social interaction. We know it damages many parts of the body. It acts as an antibiotic in the gut, so it eliminates other bacteria so it can survive there and stay there. It causes leaky gut, damages the intestines. It affects the brain because it affects the dopamine neurotransmitter system. Other of these microbial metabolites affect the serotonin transmitter system. So those two have a huge effect on your mood, your aggression, your anxiety, behavior, your happiness. It affects the kidney. It's actually most known as a nephrotoxin, very damaging to the kidneys. And sadly, many adults with autism have kidney problems. This is one of the main reasons. It damages the liver and it causes the liver to it puts more detoxification load on the liver. It damages the immune system. The immune system becomes less able to sense infections and less able to fight them. And it damages the mitochondria, resulting in a lot of oxidative stress. So bottom line is almost every biochemical issue, almost every medical problem for autism that we've looked at and been looking at for the last 25 years could be explained by these microbial metabolites. And now we've developed a diagnostic test. It's about 95% accurate in distinguishing kids with autism from typical kids. The few kids it doesn't detect are kids with other single gene disorders like Fragile X. So 10% of kids with autism roughly have a single gene disorder. Our test wouldn't detect those, but our test suggests that 90% of kids with autism, even those who don't have obvious gut symptoms, have high levels of toxic metabolites. A very simple example is alcohol. Yeast make alcohol, all right? Yeast make a lot of worse toxins in the gut, but they also produce a little bit of alcohol. We think about the effect of alcohol on the human brain and how it affects emotion regulation, causes slurring of your language. It affects your ability to learn, concentrate, make you very aggressive, very anxious. And so it can affect your motor coordination. A very simplistic way of putting it is that we believe that 90% of kids with autism are drunk on harmful metabolites from their gut. Some of these metabolites 100 times more toxic than alcohol. And we have the lab data to show it in one study, and there are 17 studies that agree with us. So for one metabolite and 6 studies for another. So bottom line is, I think this is a key factor in kids with autism. I won't say it's the factor. I'll say it's a major contribution. And if we get rid of those harmful bacteria making these metabolites, I won't say we can cure the kids. We can greatly reduce their symptoms.
So I guess we have like a plan for the future, because we should discuss, connection, gut and nervous system and your research, but also maybe we need to talk separately about these toxic metabolites and diagnostic tools that you are preparing, because it really sounds amazing that we can help a lot of people with that knowledge. As for now, I'm very grateful for this conversation about nutritional interventions. And we will try maybe to below our interview put some links to the research and to your recommendation, because I want everything to be available for the parents, for the doctors, for the dietitians, and I guess we have a lot of information to share with them. So we will try to do that the best possible. And then we will, plan for the next time another interview, another conversation. I'm very, very grateful. I'm really inspired. I will really study your research and I will get prepared for the next conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay.